Viel guten Tag, BookTube. Here to talk to you today about Baron Bagge, a novella by Lernet-Holenia, Alexander Lernet-Holenia, 1897-1976. Short work, but full of fascinating stuff. We'll get right to it in a minute. But first, I want to give my big thanks to Katja at Page Turners for organizing this group read with the Reading Around the World Classics group. So I mentioned some really fascinating ideas in this work. It is action-packed in terms of it begins almost with a duel. However, it is full of philosophical stuff and psychological stuff and theological stuff and mythological stuff. We'll talk about some of that stuff today. I want to just give you a couple tastes of little bits, almost aphoristic bits of philosophy, almost Nietzschean in their pithiness, and then before I get to our main theme. So one point the author says that we are only pretexts for one another, which I thought was a really interesting idea that I could do a whole video on just that alone. At another point says that feelings are not decisions. Also something really, really interesting, especially in the context and the scene in which it happens. However, I'm only going to read you one little bit from this novella today to keep things short, and it's about gender. So here's what he wrote. Truth to tell, what women could do, if only they wished it. If they were the way they ought to be and could be, if they followed their inner promptings, if they were not within themselves constantly drowning out the voice of the goddess by trivialities, selfishness, timidity, miseducation, and sham, they would long ago have taken their place upon all the thrones of the world, instead of being daily compelled to beg for a pittance of life from equally petty, unpleasant, and small-souled men. A lot to unpack in that, but that's for another video, perhaps, if you like. My main theme today is going to be the liminal, the place between. Historically, Austria's place between Germany and the rest of Europe in both wars, where she was sort of almost held captive, almost a Stockholm syndrome. Place between life and death, definitely. We'll get to that in a minute. So mythologically, I've read that this is referring to Norse or Northern mythology. However, I find it to be pretty pantheistic in its mythology. I don't know exactly to what goddess they just referred, but at another point they referred to the ancient gods of our clan. Towards the end, there's mention of a hecatomb where his fallen comrades are buried. Excuse me, the main character's fallen comrades are buried. A hecatomb, that's very Greco-Roman or Greek. That goes back to Greek stuff. You know, the girl who comes, Charlotte, Lotta, comes to get him off the battlefield. That's practically a Valkyrie. You've also got Arabic stuff at the Golden Bridge. The end is compared to the Arabic bridge of Al-Sirat, the blade bridge to heaven, right? So lots of references to different mythologies. So basically the major spoilers for the whole thing. Although in a way the author spoils themselves with the frame story, for example, the duel in the beginning. We know that this guy is telling us this story, right? So he's survived. Apparently he's alive. So we know that from the beginning, even though most of the rest of the story is going to be sort of in this in-between state. And then also there's only, I think, two places that I found besides the frame where he sort of lets the cat out of the bag. And interestingly, both of those are, in a way, kind of Biedermeier moments. Biedermeier is the almost mawkish Borgie character. So one is a makeup, to do with makeup, that style of rouge wasn't worn yet at that time. So obviously the narrator is speaking from a later time period, and the other to the dance. They didn't have dances before dinner at that time yet. So it'd be super easy to eliminate the frame, eliminate these two references, and you would truly have the reader in this undecidable, you know, relationship to the main character, the protagonist, whether they're alive, whether they're dead, we don't know. It's sort of Schrodinger's cat. I guess it's Schrodinger's soldier. You know, he's in the box. Is he alive? Is he dead? We don't know until we know. But we know from the beginning that he survived this, right? So he feels these pebbles. They're made to charge this bridge, which cavalry, you know, in World War I was the last time cavalry was used because it was useless. You couldn't charge, you know, machine gun embankments, let alone a bridge, you know, a choke point like a bridge. It was a massacre. You know, I find that all the World War I stories come to an absurdist moment. I think it became truly obvious to everyone how absurd war was. You know, whether you got The Good Soldier Švec by Jaroslav Hasek, that's, you know, where your life depends on these comrades and their, you know, Nimrods. Or in this case, your commanding officer is suicidal, and you know, you have to just follow him into certain death. Or in Hemingway, right? In Hemingway, it's more like they get lost, and then they're shot as deserters, which they weren't deserting. Just how easily your own people could kill you. Well, this still exists. Friendly fire was, I think, claimed as many people in Iraq War One as anyway. The commander is an interesting character, name of Semler. I'm not sure what his deal was, whether it was glory or what he was looking for, or if he was just suicidal and wanted to take the world with him. Very strange, because the officers went to him and said, look, this is a crazy idea, charge this bridge. So they charge the bridge. Guy feels like he's hit with some, you know, pebbles or whatever. And then this woman comes, kisses him. She's been, you know, waiting for him. She was promised, I guess the families knew each other. She was supposed to marry him. And she takes him to this sort of dream castle. It's kind of a Siege Perilous moment. Kind of like Galahad, I think it is, who goes in the castle with all the temptation, all the ladies, only women. Although Galahad, I think, is the one who finally gets the Grail in the end. So maybe he was the one that wasn't supposed to ask questions. But anyway, there's this fairy tale castle, and they're having a ball, and so everybody's in different period costumes. You know, it's pretty clear that all these people are dead. But of course, our guy survives. So he wakes up and he's on the bridge and he's injured, and then that's sort of the end of the story. But what I find is super interesting, this in betweenness, for many reasons. So I mentioned Austria. The state of a soldier, I think, is very alive and very dead at the same time. So ways in which it's very alive. Well, the adrenaline rush, right? We feel very alive when we feel this rush of adrenaline, right? And you can see that with the kids with their, you know, first-person shooters. A sense of purpose, you know, for those who believed in the cause. You've got this real sense of purpose, and that you never feel really sort of more proud of your existence, I think, than when you feel you're doing something that matters. At the same time, So besides the risk of life, right, that you never know from 1 minute to the next your life could end, there's also a way that you're sort of deadened. Well, first you got to subsume the ego to follow the orders, right? You have to be just a cog in the wheel. So that's sort of an ego death. And then also I think there's a deadening effect when you just see all the horrors of war. You just become sort of dead to it, right? Kind of desensitized, we say. So that's what I think is really the sort of main overarching theme, tone, plot of this work is, in a very mythological feeling way, looking at the soldier's lot as between life and death. I think that's most of what I wanted to cover. Like I said, this would be a pretty short one. So let me know what you think of these ideas. If you've read other World War I narratives that also had these absurdist moments, or other works that obviously there's Owl Creek at Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, and other Pedro Paramo, and other works of this liminal. Nepantla is the Nahuatl term for it, this liminal state. Yeah, it was a great read, really enjoyable. Had a great time with it, and I can definitely recommend it to anybody who, even if you don't like war narratives, this is most of the time is spent in the Siege Perilous, in the fairy castle. Just a little bit of battle stuff in the beginning. It is interesting in the romantic context, right? So, in the romances, right, of the Middle Ages, the quest is for the Grail, right? Now, you can argue if that's the feminine or whatever. But by the time of Romanticism, you have this idealized female, perfect, leitmotif, if you will. And so it makes sense that in his castle, the prize, I don't know what you want to say, the main motivator is this woman who just loves him from go. In fact, they get married because the crazy boss guy wants to charge him off in search of the Russians again, and he's mustering them at 4 a.m. and so poor guy has to get married at the end of this ball at 2 a.m. or whatever, and then rush off to chase the Russians some more, which he won't find, but he will find the Golden Bridge, but he doesn't cross it. All right, even though I've given you the plot, this is why I'm not afraid of spoilers. You've got to read it for yourself to see how it's done. I mean, that's the beauty of these things, right? So, yeah, even if there's only 9 stories existing in the world, they're infinitely different in their tellings, and always will be, thank goodness, and that's the fun of it. Okay, thank you. Tschüss. Entschuldigung. Bye-bye.